Hi, everyone, and welcome to Replenish Earth Live, where we explore climate action through innovative and exciting speakers. Today marks the final day of London Climate Action Week, where we drive the national and international climate action policy response, prioritizing green recovery. I'm Tia Kansara, and today we're going to be hosting Maryam AYATI, a Persian-American raised in California with a political science background. She has a legacy of identifying and leading novel triple bottom ventures at the heart of energy in corporate and startup settings around the world. Today, she leads Neo Holdings. She'll be talking about Neo today quite a bit, and she'll be presenting about it. Neo brings an established industry giants together with a climate and entrepreneurial ecosystem in mutual profit models. Earlier in her career in private equity, she's led large-scale deployment of novel, clean technology, including some of the world's first downstream liquefied natural gas value chains to replace diesel and fuel oil. She is an absolute bomb. I cannot wait for her to join. Here is Maryam. Welcome to Replenish Earth Live.
Hi, Tia. Thank you so much for that wonderful, wonderful introduction. It's an absolute pleasure for me to be here, to get to talk to someone I admire and I love your work, but also to share a little bit of what we're doing with Neo and where we hope this journey takes us. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, also a shout out to Kyle for introducing us, because
Absolutely.
just put an email together, had no idea what was going to happen, and before you know it, here's an opportunity to be able to work together and collaborate. And I think the future, of course, the UN has got an SDG on partnerships, but I really do feel that the moment that we can sort of extend a hand out and grow, that kind of growth requires partnership and collaboration and understanding. And I think that having that clear vision and the clear map of, whatever it is that we want to create together is something really and incredibly powerful. So thank you very much, Kyle.
Absolutely. Ditto that, right? Thanks, Kyle. And there is a very cool moment right now where these conversations, all unexpected, unscripted, and almost unforeseen, are starting to set the tone for a total future economy, because everything's converging, right? Post-COVID, the access to the data and a digital revolution is making us all friends in ways we didn't know we could be friends, right? And making us communicate so much more freely. So really looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, and sort of like piggybacking on that is the number of people that we've been running projects with during the entire COVID and we've never met is phenomenal. Like, I've actually never met these people, and I feel as if they're part of my day, part of my week, part of my projects. And I just feel so, just so close digitally, considering we're in lockdown in the UK. But that doesn't stop us. And I think that's one of the most powerful gifts I think that we've been given, despite it being we're in a situation of lockdown, right? I think in terms of the work that you've been doing, and I'm really keen for you to share more about Neo Holdings, is for me the sort of, and before we get into that, is the challenge of understanding the learnings from the fossil fuel industry, for which you've got incredible experience and incredible insights and understanding and learnings. And I feel that often we point fingers at the oil and gas industry, but without recognizing that we are living still the transition. We're still not there at that place of what we call at Replenish Earth replenished, right? We're not at that space where everything is regenerative and reforested. So it takes time to transition, but also there are incredible learnings from the oil industry, the challenges that the industry has had, the opportunities in educating people about what their learnings are as well. And I just wanted to say that I'm so grateful and proud of the work that you're doing to connect these very big moments in our existence where, one, we realize what we're birthed from, right? Like going back to Mark Twain's quote of the two most important days of our life. The first is when we're born, and the second is when we realize why. And I feel that I think most of our audience is born in the times where oil was, and these sorts of resources were part of our economy and important to our growth and have led to a lot of prosperity, but also recognizing that we are in that mass transition away from fossil fuels and identifying renewable sources. So just sort of prefacing that.
Thank you. You say it better than I do. We should take this recording and use it often. Look, for me, I have spent 20 years in, I'm not old. I've never said that out loud. I've spent 20 years in energy, between fossil fuels to cleaning up fossil fuels, right? So a lot of my work has always been around how do you take, for example, the gas that's, when we operate natural gas value chains, we burn a lot of extra gas and flare it into the earth, into the atmosphere. Sometimes we even vent it because it's not valuable, it's not ready. And so I've spent a lot of time even just capturing that waste gas and putting it back into the energy system. And more recently, I've spent a lot of time working on redesigning our expectations, both as energy industry executives and as humans and as society, on what that path to market should look like. And is it okay? Of course it isn't. Is it all sorted? Of course it isn't. But is there a century of lessons learned? And is there a century of learning how to become stewards of a common resource that really should be benefiting everyone in society? And intuitively, it should also be benefiting the societies where it came from. By contrast, often what's happened is that's been globalized, it's been centralized, and there's been prominent forces and prominent companies, prominent countries who've gone into nations that have these resources, done their very best to technically get them out of the ground and get them to market. But in doing this, they've made what was a hard to access resource even more stranded from the local communities, because it's going elsewhere to fuel those communities and the wealth is going elsewhere. And the conversation I kind of want to set the scene for today is, 100, 120 years after the first land grab, for all of those reserves that really set the scene for how energy would fuel and fossil fuels would fuel prosperity and socioeconomic growth and wealth of nations and individuals. We're undergoing a similar allocation and design of a future economy that will be based on a digital representation of all of those resources that we all need to live our lives. And there's a really important moment to be thoughtful and mindful and bring to the fore everything the fossil fuel industry has learned, and use that, both the footprint and the learnings, to make sure we set the scene for this iteration of access to resources to be much more equitable, for prosperity to not be wasteful, and for prosperity not to leave people behind. That's why I left Shell, where I had amazing friends, and I'm very proud of the work Shell does and BP does and many energy companies do in trying to step up and really take ownership of the past and set a new path for the future. But we also hope to work with them and many others in bringing that commitment with people, opportunities, and ideas that aren't in the room, and in designing a common future that actually fuels everyone's prosperity and growth.
That's so much
what we do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for saying that, and also to living that. I think one of the things that really makes me feel honored to hear that is the transition hasn't been easy. And I think this transition that we're under is very much like the new normal, where it's very difficult to have any kind of steady state homeostasis, comfort, in knowing what the future is going to look like. And I really do think that in honoring the future resources and our access to them, the reliability of the access to them, and also understanding what does it mean to have this communal space. And I think increasingly there is a question on the human commons, the digital commons, the physical commons. And I think when it comes to these commons, we all have a right to the table. And I feel that that is a human right. We may have very different educations, we may have barriers to entry on income levels or race or religion or gender or all of these factors all at once. But I do still think and stand by, we have an incredible opportunity today to explore the most basic human right, and that is, you know, how we are indigenous to Earth. And I feel that Earth is ours and is all of ours. I don't feel that one person owns it, therefore no one owns it. And I feel we all have a role to play in understanding how organizations, you know, those that may or may not be taking resources out of the earth have a responsibility to let us know what it is that their vision is, and how we as a global community can partake in the governance and protection and understanding what that means as a future. So it's, yeah, I just wanted to sort of add that, because I think this came up so strong in our previous conversation that I really wanted to table that and understand that we're moving towards a humanity that goes beyond human to planetary, and we've designed all systems just for humans, right? You know, it's just like whoever it was that designed the sensors underneath the water taps didn't realize that darker skin would have a very different, you know, light penetration. So of course, if you had darker skin, the water tap wouldn't work. So it's kind of like, you know, a bias that we've created into a system that we need to almost correct and understand. It's like artificial intelligence that has been, you know, designed and programmed to have a very specific language bias or cultural bias or political bias. And I think we have to be quite open and honest about where those biases are.
Well, if I may, and I know we have lots of content to get into, but to help set the scene one step further and up the ante on your comments, Tia, what's fascinating to me is the common protocols of a future that actually isn't just about the resources we consume, but how we access those resources and who governs our access to those resources and who governs the information I have access to when I think about the decisions I'm making about those resources. All of that is being drafted today, but by very powerful technology companies, and we're not at the table. And we're also not ensuring that we take those learnings from our last reallocation of resources and the last land grab for humanity's common resources and how that was deployed. We're not taking that into the room. And so if we had to sum up what I do, what Kyle does, what Clint does, what the whole team around us and the ecosystem behind us is working to achieve, is making sure this system design takes into account all the lessons of the past and all the powers of the past and turns them into stewards of a better future. And that really matters, because while we're paying attention to the consequences of decisions made 100 years ago when we ran our fossil fuel industry the way we did, we're missing the need and the opportunity to also focus on the emergent design of a new economy that will govern my son's life for the next 100 years. And that's what I want to drive some urgency to, and the need for collaboration lies therein.
Fantastic. Thank you. I know that you'd prepared some slides for our audience, and whilst you're getting that ready and sharing your screen, I wanted to invite our audience to ask questions, get involved in comments and share your thoughts on some of the questions that we asked already. But also, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Maryam, please put them into the comment section, and we'll do our best to share them. Right, Maryam, you
Awesome.
are set.
Lovely. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about NEO, and I mostly would really, really love to have a conversation. And even more important than that, I'd like to invite you to collaborate with us, to put your ideas on the table, knowing that we'll build them with you and we'll take you through the channels to deploy them. We don't plan to take any of these ideas to life ourselves. We are creating ecosystems of interactions with established industry. So we are building this community, and we'd love you to be part of it. You can reach us at neo.co, our website, or just email me or any of the team. We like to start with this visual, and it's a really important reminder for me and the team. We talk often about the pale blue dot in reference to Mr. Sagan's description of our planet. The moment you move far away enough to get away from the racial divide, from the economic divide, and fighting over the next 3 years' profit, and you put it in context, it's a tiny common thing that we share, and all of humanity's love, war, and famine is encompassed in this tiny dot in the universe. And it does drive home the sense of stewardship for us. We also get a bit closer in and are mindful of the legacy of the past on our pale blue dots and our lives today. I'm in California. I live a few minutes from Malibu. So we're on fire on this side. My mom's house was on fire in the Bobcat fires. And that brings it to life. So there is genuine mindfulness that the future cannot look like the past. But before we move forward, I also want to put two paradigms on the table that really drove my personal shift to want to go and build something new with people who bought into and were committed genuinely to rolling their sleeves up and driving a different outcome. The first one is the propensity for wastefulness to go up on an individual basis as the wealth of an individual goes up. And what you see here is an illustration of the way the UK, the US, this bright orange line on top, as GDP per capita goes up, our individual footprint and waste goes up. Whereas somewhere like Japan has managed to reach very similar levels of prosperity and GDP per capita with a far lower footprint of waste. And then you have places like India and Africa and much of the economic South who are deciding and who are making decisions today that will take them on one or the other of these paradigms. We believe our initial duty is to make sure that we de-link prosperity from wastefulness, and that the path that the next iteration takes on wealth and success and happiness and sufficiency isn't wasteful, and that the West start to reverse this trend and really reduce its footprint. We believe that comes through a whole range of technologies, including the ability to tokenize and value every piece of a individual, a society, a city's footprint when it comes to consumption, whether that's natural resources or whether that's fuels and hydrocarbons, water, solar power, where that comes from, what the footprint of that is in getting to you, being able to price that in, as well as the waste you produce. If I leave my lights on 3 times more than what I should be using as an average consumer, that should be really visible to me, and it should be really visible to the monetary price I have to pay to be able to access those resources. So we need to get this curve down, and we need to make sure that the developing curve genuinely takes a less wasteful path to prosperity. The second heartbreaking reality of this is much of this prosperity over the 100 years past has been built on access to one of the most fundamental resources for prosperity, and that's energy. The ability to turn on a light, to have refrigeration, to be able to drive to work, drive to school, to be able to fly to a protest, to turn on a computer, to have this conversation. That's been enabled by the resources that the energy companies basically developed and brought into our homes, in almost every home in the West. The shocking tragedy of that is it also left this behind. The percentage of the people's population who do not have access to the very thing that the resources under their ground, under their earth, gave all the rest of us. In places like Nigeria, where the world's resource wealth and the fuels that fuel my life today and yours have come from and enriched us and given us so much opportunity, the way that so much of the population in Africa has been left behind, the way that the resources that were indigenous and were theirs needed to be developed with good reason, but the system around their development globalized and centralized that access. And then now it needs to trickle back in versus having done a much more localized version of that, 100 years ago, when people arguably didn't know better. And I want to draw this parallel to the intro that Tia and I just gave, because that is the crux of the dilemma. Because how do you make sure that we finish making available the basic resources for prosperity to so many that have none, while we set the scenes for a system that digitizes prosperity, creates many barriers of its own, and again, you want to make sure you don't recreate the same centralized, globalized, wasteful version of that leaves riches in the pockets of few, but poverty for many. I guess I want to talk about one other thing when we talk about digitalization and access to energy to set the scene. If you think about someone in a place like this, or even someone back in some of the villages in my home country in Iran, where to be able to be bankable, my mother or I, when I was there, you would walk to a bank branch. You would walk. So what it would take you to be banked is the ability to walk to your village bank branch, or if you're somewhere really rural, to walk to the city, walk into a branch, have a government issued ID that costs you nothing, and be able to use that to be banked, to have access to utilities. Should they be available in your area, you would just go to a utility center and pay your bills and sign up with a government issued ID. To be able to buy groceries, you would go into the market or you would go to the farmer. But all of those things, the hurdle to access has been the ability to walk to the place where the service was offered. What we are now introducing in a digitized world, overlaid on this level of poverty, impoverishment, and being left behind, is a world where that access is being cut into multiple layers of profit for various entities who've never been here, people who've never even left their awesome offices somewhere in cities that you guys can name as easily as I can. But in a future version of the world, Africa's most disadvantaged and economically disenfranchised people will have to be able to get a cellular phone, will have to be able to pay for cellular connectivity, will have to be literate enough to use that cell phone, and will have to have some sort of digital identification before they can act and access all of the services that brick and mortar provide today. So when we excitedly celebrate the leapfrogging of brick and mortar, we're also celebrating that the fact that 6, 7, 8 different international companies, digital behemoths or payment behemoths, are going to monetize access to the most basic goods that people take for granted today. And we're all very busy worrying about a legacy of the past that we're not necessarily integrating the lessons of that into the legacy of the future. And that's a thing we're really trying to work hard to bridge. And I'll tell you a little bit of the how. Tia, before I do that, I want to pause for a moment and just give anyone opportunities to step in, build, or ask questions.
Yeah, totally. I think also, whilst the audience is getting some questions together, I think what's really fascinating for me, and we had this in a chat with Sujatha this morning, was that when we talk about access to energy, we often don't think about that being a human right. The fact that just being able to, and it kind of reminds me of what we talked about before as well. Like in India, it's not uncommon that you're having dinner and all of a sudden the light goes off and you kind of just like continue to eat because that was just the moment that the electricity sort of got switched off. But also something that was really striking for me was that people would actually just ask, like in some of the countries that you've worked in, for the times that they are definitely going to have electricity, so that phones can be charged, or refrigerators can be charged, or whatever else needs to be charged can be charged. So having that level of security is such a fundamental piece in the lifestyles that we live today. And it's not that we don't take it for granted. I think it's that we're not aware of what's actually happening in many of the other parts of the world where this isn't as readily available or reliable. And I remember a discussion that we had with Peter as well earlier in the week, that some of the work that he's doing in giving people access to ecosystems where there's not only the support, but the support goes way beyond, the talking about it and into the actions. I don't have any questions in the...
Yeah, and let me build on your comment, because you're reminding me of a survey we did in Nigeria. And the question was, what is your expectation? And this was of the population, right? Everyone, and not just villages. What's your expectation of your ability to access energy? And we thought it would be something like you described. We want reliable access to energy. And it did indeed come back that 80% of the people we surveyed wanted to know which block of time in a week or in a day, if they were very fortunate, could they expect to have power so they could do these things, right? And I think that's the human tragedy of some of our activism that I want to bring to the fore, because I sometimes talk to really amazing, smart people sitting in Los Angeles or San Francisco, staring at a laptop powered more often with coal than they realize, with lights that's powered with energy from countries they will never want to be associated with. And they tell me that it's ridiculous that I talk about energy companies with fossil fuel and we should be talking about solar. And I say, fantastic. But our activism needs to keep in mind that there is a really basic requirement that we are trying to rob many of the world's most vulnerable populations from. Because to get to where you can actually have these grand opinions of what is right or wrong for other people, we should at least walk a mile in their shoes. And I think that's what I'd really love to make sure that our passion and our energy is thinking about, not just our desire to alleviate either guilt at an individual or societal level, or to feel good about doing, putting a solar panel on my roof, but also to remember that there's a portion of the population that we've left behind. And let's make sure we think about that in our next steps, and integrate them into the activities we create. And I think what you said about entrepreneurial ecosystems and the ability to fuel them is critical. And I don't know if you knew this, but you're setting me up for my next slide. So, so we've got, there's a lot about the past and about today that I described, and we have a different plan for a future to live in. And it really interweaves industry giants with an ecosystem of entrepreneurs, local and global, setting the scene for every man and woman from every part of the world to be able to be at least on a common starting point when they compete for these opportunities. And we've got some amazing legal partners that are curating all of the back end of a contractual relationship and legal support. So 3 ladies in Lagos and 4 men in San Francisco have the same legal support, have the same financial understanding as they go into a negotiation with anything, because absolutely that's essential. Otherwise, there's just no way they can compete, right? And we work on mutual profit and partnership models, really to bring a whole system of players together in curating this future. And we have a digital and marketplace that we're bringing entrepreneurs onto. They're going through an identity vault that allows them to curate all of the assets they need to have a digital identity. We then go through a process with our partner, one of the big 4 audit firms, and really help them get their content and their narrative and their identity representation to where it's able to pass KYC and AML as a vendor and a partner to any of the world's international corporations. And then we work with the international corporations to curate the opportunities that they are willing to allow the entrepreneur ecosystem to compete for. And we break those down into really bite-sized pieces and what we call unbreakable promises, so that these entrepreneurs who have already created this digital identity and presence, have the legal support, have the financial support, are genuinely able to compete to be at this table, because we do not want to see all of the access be stranded the same way that the energy resources were removed from those countries. Why do we do it this way? And I'll tell you a story. One of my, a project I'm incredibly proud of was I was the founding chairperson for a company called VACT, VAKT, where we brought together 12 of our greatest competitors. I was at Shell at the time, to digitize the back end of oil trading in the North Sea. Now, this is incredibly established. It's the major leagues of oil trading. And by having those people around, and we built a startup from scratch that basically put on a blockchain platform all of our backroom activity in that market. But by having those people around the table, and by having energy say, yeah, we'll use you, a startup that we built launched to 67% of the North Sea crude oil traders launched and signed up to it on day one. Now, try to imagine what that means for any startup, right? And anyone who wants to look this up, if you look up North Sea crude trade, you realize it's the Brent trading network, which really sets the scenes for how all of global trade of oil is priced. And if you can launch to 67% on day one as a startup, my God, the possibilities are endless. This is why we think that opportunity to leverage existing footprints and partnership with industry's giants is game changing for any entrepreneur. We also believe, on the flip side of it, that established industry, and whatever your opinion might be of fossil fuel companies and energy companies, having been in one for 20 years and worked with my colleagues across all the other ones for the same amount of time, it's literally made up mostly, some continue to deny this is the case, but mostly it's made up of humans who really want to do the right thing. They just don't have all of the information. They don't know how to take a talent pool and a footprint and infrastructure that's been curated and designed to deliver one thing so that it delivers something different. And their whole system of inputs, points of view, understanding, and so the creative license to imagine a different outcome is incredibly limited and closed because they're trying to design a different future in a siloed laboratory. There's a real opportunity to merge that with the world of open source, world-class, cross-functional entrepreneurs who are willing to jump in alongside these partners and really rapidly prototype, test, and validate an entirely different way of interacting with our resources, with that footprint, and what that future looks like. Now, I want to give an example of this because it might sound super lofty, but it's really practical. What we think the future needs to look like, instead of a solo gray whale, which is, I think, what many folks think of when they think of energy companies of the past, we're discovering the way to create symbiotic ecosystems full of color and vibrance and coexistence. That's our mission. Because our North Star is to get to a place where waste and inequality isn't the consequence of the next iteration on prosperity and access to resources. So I want to give you an example of the work we're doing now in Africa, and this is a real project, and we're building this and we're deploying it across multiple thousand gas stations across Africa. But I want you to think about that as an exercise in turning footprint, what already exists in a physical format, into a common canvas to redesign on top of. And I'll give you an example. A gas station, right? I was reading a statistic that I need to verify, so I don't want to put it in the ground as a fact. But I was reading a statistic that most of the world's population lives within a 15-minute walk to a gas station, right? And in a world where access to energy is fundamentally becoming essential, and in a world where access to connectivity is fundamentally becoming essential, but if you're illiterate, or you don't have a digital identity, you don't have a cell phone, or you can't charge your phone because you don't have electricity, where you can't refrigerate your food, and most of the food that subsistence farmers make between the farm to the table rots and goes to waste. And so that whole cycle is one of waste, because they don't have access to energy. You look at this, as an incredibly high value node for a community, a canvas where access to energy is guaranteed because it generates it, where access to cooling is guaranteed because it generates it, where you could have a physical human who helps anyone who isn't literate or doesn't have a computer. What could you do? What could you do with that footprint without tearing a single thing down, without creating more waste, without having to build new buildings, without having to do any of those things? And then the other question I want to ask you, and the way we do this, is I ask you here what you would do, but most of the time, for the last at least month and a half, my team and I have been asking entrepreneurs and humans in Africa, what would you do? What do you have? How do we integrate your solution and your idea into this canvas? And how do we fund you? How do we support you? How do we give you this growth staircase? So as digital leapfrogs brick and mortar in your basic economic infrastructure, how do we make sure you are the biggest participant in that economic activity? And how do we make sure you help us design a decentralized version of this so that wealth is distributed, so that design is distributed, so that participation in every form is distributed locally and then scaled globally, not the other way around? So this is where I'd really love to change gears, to stop sharing and start having a conversation and really get people to engage with us on this topic. I'd love to have you do it here live, but also, this is genuinely an invitation to co-create, to build together. What I've shared with you is one mission. We have multiple projects live and an incredible ecosystem of partners across industry, across tech, across local channels, across legal, across audit and compliance, to make sure we redesign a future that's decentralized with access for all. And I'd love to invite all of you to join us. So please reach out to us and we'll welcome you into our community and we'll build together.
I think that was really beautiful and really well shared. I think one of our biggest challenges, and I think just speaking to the project, one of the projects that you're working on right now, and the one that we decided we were going to share with the audience, is that this is an opportunity for not only recognizing what resources we do have, but in recognizing what opportunities we have in collaborating and developing and organizing ourselves well. When it comes to entrepreneurship, we often think of an entrepreneur that has raised seed, pre-fund, like pre-seed, seed, blah, 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 and then before you know it, they're all located in one location, happens to be Silicon Valley because it's one of the most famous. And, wealth is sort of, it turns into a bit of a geographic nexus. And I think that in the example that you gave and the opportunity that people have is in encouraging people to seek the solutions that are local, that can give solutions that are to local people, especially in rural environments. As you said, 15 minutes to get to, a gas station or a community hub or a local, place of entrepreneurship, like an entrepreneurship hub, would be amazing. Having that geographic context already where, even during lockdown, people are filling up their cars, or if they've got electric cars, then charging them up, or whatever form of transport they're using. This is already a resource. To sort of stack these resources, or this particular resource, stack it up with a variety of solutions. This is not to say that, food wouldn't be available there. Why not? And I think that is the ... Why not? What's the opportunity, and how can local farmers and local entrepreneurs and local inventors, local solutions be created into an ecosystem wherever these hubs are? And I think this is the invitation. What would you want in this hub, and how can we create these hubs so that they're at the moment, of course, they happen to be in one location. They could be in multiple locations around the world where making the most and the best use of these locations, where it gives people the opportunity to not waste, as Maryam said. I can only imagine the percentage of food that is wasted in getting it from farm to plate.
I mean, I'll give you another number. I was so I get to assess and sit on the panels for the Said Business School executive MBAs on entrepreneurship, and one team from Africa had done this amazing piece of work on what is the cost for a subsistence farmer. And when I say subsistence farmer, their numbers showed that these are people who are making $2 a week, right?
Oh,
$1 of that is wasted because the produce, whatever it is they're creating and farming, never makes it from farm to a table. And this is just basic lack of infrastructure, right? So we're working with a lot of amazing companies who've basically built distribution and supply chain channels to get LPG to the last mile to displace wood burning stoves. And we're saying, well, can we also use that to distribute food? Can we use the things you do to provide people with energy, even though some of these people have lived 30 years, for example, in some of the most unforgiving parts of the planet because they're trying to bring energy, and they are vilified because they're associated with oil and gas. But there is a really heroic moment to say, can we jump on your supply chain and use it to do so many other things? And everyone's saying yes. And the other thing that I think is really amazing, Tia, something you and actually Kyle talked to me a lot about is the stewardship of the wisdom of the elders. And I just want to tell you, my co-founder Clint and I get on these calls with some of the most incredible humans, who founded so-and-so company and have an insane, they're way past wanting to make money. They're about, they've retired many years ago. And we say, we're going to do this. Will you be part of it? And they all say yes. And they all roll up their sleeves because they're dying to deploy that wisdom in a new format that provides good, not just centralized wealth. And giving them that opportunity and for giving them whatever past we believe made them wealthy if we don't approve is incredibly healing and powerful on all fronts. So that's, can you tell I love my job?
Yeah, kinda.
It's just, there's so much to do. Yeah.
I think there's a lot to do. And I think this is where, often when we look at the question, what can we do about climate action? Often we're hearing about, many of the most extreme stats, how the world is, increasingly becoming more, covered in challenges, and the relationship that we have with not only ourselves but with others is being strained through a variety of different lenses that may or may not be ours. I think one of the things that you shared with me, which was so powerful, was, are we even getting the same sorts of information? Is that information even being regulated to give us the opportunity to really recognize that we're almost, I often say that the relationship that we have with the climate is different. And one of the reasons that it's different is because the experience of the climate emergency is not the same for everybody. In certain places in the world, there are more extreme environmental scenarios that are playing out. And until we have this experience, which we call the minimum viable shock, it's very difficult to give that immersive experience to somebody who is living in an entirely different climate. And I think this is where, having the opportunity to recognize not only that we have different parts of the puzzle, like we have different pieces of the jigsaw, and in coming together, we have the opportunity to really build out a much larger picture, but also to build out the resources that we may have locally or in our communities or at home. For example, if we're in lockdown, that we can really sort of ask these questions about the next steps and these actions and breaking them down and recognizing that there are other people that are also joining us on this journey. We're not alone. We're all in this together. So I think what's really admirable of the work that you've been doing, especially taking one example of the kinds of prospective products that you can create that are much more aligned with the environment, or social structures or organizational structures or business models. This is about creativity. It's about creating the future that we desire. And coming back to your first slide of the moonshots, often when we talk about a moonshot, we're talking about something that doesn't exist. It didn't exist. Like, who is it that designed the first architectural building, architectural designs? Who is it that designed a chair? Who is it that designed a window? It was designed from nothing. It was designed with, the aim of having somewhere to sit, the aim of having somewhere warm and comfortable and safe. And I feel sometimes we almost like lead ourselves into a bit of a corner by saying these are the standards and these are the, the formulas, and this is the way that it should be. Well, the should be is questionable, considering in COVID times there is no normal. And so, it really does give us an opportunity to go back to the drawing board and say, right, what can we do? How can we apply our imagination? This is the theme of the pledge today. We've had this People's Pledge across the entirety of London Climate Action Week, and each and every single day, as part of our Rise to Replenish challenge, we have activities. And today's activity is, how can you imagine a different reality? So coming back to the moonshots, when we're sort of like, thinking so far ahead with a future that we are not experiencing right now. We're talking about your son here, 9 years old. We're talking about my nephew, 4 years old, with the futures that they will be living, the realities that we cannot imagine today. But what does that mean for us as a community to be able to design something that doesn't exist, that is in an imagination, right? And that's where we are. We are in our reality, a different one for every single perspective. If we go back to Maryam's conversation about the brain, we can understand that if you're not doing the thinking for yourself, somebody else is putting in suggestions, identifying different things that you should be purchasing through advertising or public relations through Edward Bernays. Who knew that he would hire a group of women to stand in front of a women's march for freedom, light them up with cigarettes, fueled by or advertising or whatever, sponsored by Marlborough, to get women to smoke? And it worked beautifully. The industry has benefited hugely from that one single, media coverage that was paid for by Edward Bernays to get women to smoke. And I think that, these sorts of tactics have been applied to benefit very specific groups. What's happening is the benefit is not just for one company or one organization or one CEO anymore. It's for communities. It's for the planet.
It should be. And I think we have a real need and a real opportunity today to fast forward with the benefit of hindsight and look at all of the resources as an opportunity for redesign, and all of our interactions as an opportunity for redesign, being mindful that as it gets digitized, it will remove inefficiency. Removing inefficiency does create incredible value, because waste, in my opinion, and many statistics will show this, that most of the energy we need in the future is the energy we waste today. So let's try to capture the waste today, and technology and digitalization and the ability to really create an identity node for all of our activities and all of our consumption and all of our waste will enable us to self-correct. And it will enable us, either at an individual And if the individual doesn't care at a system-wide level, self-correct, and put a price on doing good and a price on doing bad. And if you do those things well, then you create a common protocol that's mutually owned and mutually rewarding. And I guess our call to action is, let's make sure we're all at the table having that conversation for the common protocol. So it sets the scene in the right way.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to delve into this area that is often a gray space, because, the oil company bashes will come out and the environmental bashes will come out, the vegan bashes there's a lot of bashing going on. And I think the opportunity of like going beyond bashing and understanding and opening our hearts to something that may not be our own reality is part and parcel of the challenge that we are facing, right? But the opportunity that we have to shift from I know it and I'm right to we know it and there's a little bit of right in all of us.
Absolutely. So well said. Thank you for having me. And thank you for listening to our story, and just an awesome week. So thank you for hosting it.
Absolutely. Maryam, thank you so much. And thank you to Neo Holdings. Thank you to Kyle. Thank you to our team. Thank you for the opportunity to delve into the work that you're doing. We wish you the best of luck. If there are any comments or questions, please do email the team at Neo or get in contact with neo.co, where all the information lies. And I think there are huge opportunities for collaboration. I know that we'll be following up with the potential of partnership. And I think that it is exactly in that collaboration that opportunities lie that we didn't know existed. So thank you very, very much, Maryam, for your time.
Thank you.
And for the opportunity of taking these questions further, and the opportunity to open up the potential for the commons being something that is communal.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. And thank you all very much for joining today. Replenishing Earth starts with the smallest of actions. You can become a replenisher too. You can participate in today's Rise to Replenish challenge and join the momentum. Today's theme is Be Imaginative, where I mention it with Maryam. Today, I pledge to rethink and be imaginative. And it could be as imaginative as you'd like, even if you are in lockdown in the kitchen, where instead of putting all of your compostable waste into a landfill container, how about using it to grow some tomatoes? We've also got the microgreens challenge and the activity of growing. We've got paper making. We've got a variety of very interesting and cool things that you can be doing. So please join our social medias. We're pretty much all over all of them, and engage with us and comment and share your questions, and whatever it is that you do, just tag us. I mean, we want to know what you're doing, and we want to support you in your journey to making climate action your personal purpose. So thank you all very much for joining us. We've got one more talk left on our live series for London Climate Action Week, and excited to have any of your suggestions for next time. Thank you very much for joining us, and see you soon.